Rain needles the air. Wind pushes people faster than they mean to move. A crowded indoor market stays open anyway. Lights humming, wet shoes squeaking, carts rolling, voices low and constant. Officer_EC, calm-focused male officer, early 30s, medium athletic build, defined jawline, short textured dark hair, light stubble, slightly tired eyes, natural skin texture with pores, tactical police uniform with subtle wear marks, grounded realistic expression, walks the aisle without rushing. Beside him, K9_shadow, black and tan German Shepherd, black saddle pattern, black facial mask, golden tan fur, upright alert ears, amber eyes, small notch on left ear, muscular structure, realistic fur texture, tactical K9 harness moves clean and quiet. Then he stops, just stops. Nose lifts once, ears lock. The leash goes tight by a fraction. Officer_EC doesn't speak. He just turns his head like he heard something no one else did. A metal taste rides the air. A cartwheel squeals. And K9_shadow starts to growl, low, controlled, certain. The bayou didn't roar like the ocean in a hurricane. It listened. Wind shoved through reeds and cypress knees with a sound like rough hands rubbing together. Water climbed the trunks in slow, deliberate inches, swallowing landmarks that had stood there long before any asphalt road tried to claim the swamp. The sky pressed low, bruised and heavy, and the rain came sideways, thin needles driven by something bigger than weather. Officer Ethan Cole kept his headlights off, not because it made him braver, because it made him harder to find. The stilt house ahead was a shadow on higher ground, a raised rectangle of wood and tin, perched above the floodline like it had learned, the hard way, what water did when it stopped asking permission. Ethan's truck rolled forward at a crawl, tires cutting through pooled runoff on the gravel shoulder. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere. The department had practically shoved him out the door with the paperwork, the kind of mandatory leave that pretended to be kindness, the kind that assumed a man could unsee certain scenes if he just drove far enough away from them. Ethan had driven south until the city lights turned into isolated porch bulbs and then into nothing at all. The bayou was supposed to be quiet, empty, a place where the world didn't reach. But the world always reached. He killed the engine under the stilt house and sat in the dark for one long breath, listening to rain drum on the hood. His hands rested on the steering wheel in a loose grip, no tremor, no fidgeting. Calm, disciplined, the kind of stillness that made other people uncomfortable because it didn't look like fear and it didn't look like relief either. It looked like readiness. His phone stayed powered off in the center console, a dead rectangle, no pings, no tracking. No calls from a precinct that had learned to reach for him when things got ugly. Ethan stepped out into the wind. The air hit like cold, wet cloth slapped across his face. He pulled his hood up and moved under the house on reflex, scanning corners, scanning gaps. Old habits weren't something you retired from. They were something you carried like bone. A gust shoved rain through the open slats and carried with it a scent that didn't belong to storms. Metal. Not the clean tang of wet nails and rusted wire, something sharper, something that made the back of his tongue taste wrong. Ethan paused. In the distance, beyond the tree line where the bayou widened into a black sheet of moving water, a sound cut through the wind. A bark. Not playful, not warning from a distance. Close, immediate. Like something alive was making sure the world knew it wasn't done yet. Ethan's body went from still to moving without argument. He grabbed the high-lumen flashlight from his door pocket, thumbed it on low, and turned toward the sound. It came again, raw and strained, swallowed halfway by wind, then thrown back in pieces. He walked fast but controlled, boots sinking in mud that didn't care about balance. The path behind the stilt house dissolved into a narrow ridge of higher ground, then into swamp grass that rippled like it was breathing. He swept the light forward. Rain turned the beam into a pale tunnel. It caught the blunt angles of a half-submerged canoe, a leaning post with a faded "no trespassing" sign, and then, farther out, something that made his chest tighten. A shape. Low. Dark. Too still to be a person standing. Too deliberate to be driftwood. Ethan's mind clicked into a different mode, one he didn't talk about, one he didn't announce. His shoulders squared, his breath slowed. The world narrowed into distances and angles and possible threats. He moved toward it. The bark came again, weaker, as if the animal was spending its last coins of energy to keep making sound. Ethan stepped into shin-deep water, then knee-deep. Cold climbed under his pants and bit his skin. "Easy," he said, not loud enough to carry far, not loud enough to advertise, just enough to put something steady into the air. The flashlight beam touched the shape. It wasn't one, it was two. A man first, young, face half in the water, hair plastered to his forehead, rope cinched around his wrists behind his back, thick enough that someone had meant it to hold. His uniform shirt was torn open, badge still catching faint light like it refused to vanish. Deputy? A rookie, if Ethan read the softness in the features right. Beside him lay a dog, a German shepherd, black and tan, coat-soaked, body rigid with cold, legs lashed together, muzzle bound in a way that had been measured, not frantic. Even pinned down, the dog's body angled toward the deputy like it would have taken the water for him if it could. The dog's eyes were open, not wide, not panicked, focused. It stared at Ethan with a look that wasn't begging. It was demanding. Ethan swallowed once. The metal smell sharpened. He spotted it then. Dark streaks on the deputy's sleeve that the rain couldn't wash away. Blood. Ethan swept the beam to the nearest piling of the abandoned pumping station. Something white was taped there, fluttering weakly in the wind. A note. Ethan didn't approach it yet. Not first. Notes were for later. Notes were what people left when they wanted you to look up. And the first rule of surviving was staying alive. Ethan knelt in the water, keeping his body low, eyes cutting across tree lines and broken structures for movement. No silhouettes, no muzzle flashes, no footfalls. The hurricane gave everyone cover, including the kind of people who staged deaths like this. He pulled his knife from his belt with one smooth motion. The dog tracked the blade, tense. Ethan kept his voice low. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dog's nostrils flared. Its body trembled, but it didn't growl. It watched. Ethan slid the knife under the rope binding the dog's legs. He cut once, clean. The rope fell away. The dog didn't bolt. It tried to move and failed, muscles refusing. Hypothermia had its own handcuffs. Still, the shepherd's head lifted an inch, and a small sound escaped its throat, a rasp that carried both pain and stubbornness. Ethan leaned closer. "Good. Stay." Then he moved to the deputy. The rope around the wrists was tighter, swollen from water, fibers biting skin raw. Ethan worked the blade carefully, not rushing, not sawing. One mistake, and you cut flesh. One mistake, and you become another threat. The rope snapped. Ethan's fingers found the deputy's carotid pulse. There, faint, a thread. He put 2 fingers under the deputy's nose, breath, shallow but present. The dog made a sound, soft, urgent, like it was counting the breaths, too. Ethan's gaze flicked to the note, still flapping. He reached for it now, careful, scanning as he moved. Tape peeled with resistance. The paper was soaked but legible, thick marker bleeding at the edges. "You don't get to save them." Dawn finishes it. No signature, no flourish. A promise. Ethan felt something cold settle behind his ribs, not fear, not shock, a simple, hard understanding. This wasn't random. This was a message, and he was now part of it. Ethan looked down at the deputy and the dog and made the kind of decision that always came fast for him. Not because he didn't feel things, because he refused to waste time pretending feeling changed math. He couldn't carry both at once in this water. He couldn't leave them both here while he fetched help that didn't exist. The storm had already eaten the roads. He slid one arm under the deputy's shoulders and hauled him up, dragging him toward higher ground with controlled force. The deputy groaned, small, sharp, then went limp again. The dog tried to rise. It collapsed. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Slow. "I'm coming back." He dragged the deputy toward the stilt house, every step a pull against sucking mud. Rain hammered his hood and ran down his neck. The deputy's weight was dead weight, but Ethan's body was built for carrying burdens that didn't cooperate. Halfway back, Ethan set the deputy down under the stilt house, out of direct rain, and sprinted back into the water. The dog was still there, still watching, still refusing to close its eyes. Ethan lifted the shepherd carefully, heavy, soaked, muscle dense beneath wet fur. The dog didn't fight him. It just pressed weakly into Ethan's chest, breath a rough flutter. Ethan carried the dog back. Under the stilt house, he laid the shepherd on an old tarp and stripped his own jacket off in one motion, draping it over the dog first. Priorities. The dog's ears twitched. Its gaze flicked to the deputy. Ethan saw it. The bond held even when bodies didn't. "Stay with him," Ethan murmured, though he didn't know if the dog understood the words or just the tone. "I'm getting you both warm." He hauled the deputy up the steps of the stilt house, muscle burning as rain made the wood slick. Inside, the air smelled like old pine cleaner and canned food and solitude. Ethan set the deputy on the couch, then brought the dog in and placed it on the floor by the nearest vent and the old propane heater. The power was already out. Of course it was. Ethan moved like the room was a checklist. Blankets, 3, then 5. Towels, dry, then less dry. A first aid kit from a kitchen cabinet that looked untouched for years. Water heated on a camp stove because Ethan had come prepared for silence, and silence always meant self-reliance. He worked fast but careful, checking for bleeds, checking airway, checking skin color. Deputy Lucas Reed, the badge on the torn shirt, said when Ethan finally looked. Lucas's lips were pale. His fingers were stiff. The dog, no tags visible, no harness now, just rope burns and wet fur and a steady gaze. Ethan crouched by the shepherd. "You got a name?" The dog blinked once, slow. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. He didn't have time. Outside, wind slammed something into the side of the house, maybe a branch, maybe debris. Ethan's head turned automatically, eyes on the window slats. His phone stayed off. He wouldn't call local dispatch even if he could. Not yet, not until he knew who wrote that note. He was wrapping Lucas's wrists when a knock hit the front door. 3 heavy strikes. Not frantic, not lost. Ethan froze with the bandage in his hand. The dog's head lifted. A low growl started in its chest, more vibration than sound. Ethan's hand moved to the pistol on the table like it belonged there. He didn't go to the door immediately. He moved to the side window, peeled back a curtain sliver, and looked out. A figure stood on the porch in a raincoat that shone with wet. Hood up, hands visible, no weapon raised. The figure knocked again, 2 hits, then paused. Ethan watched posture, weight distribution, the way the person stood, not jittery, not predatory, alert, competent. The hood pushed back. A woman's face appeared, pale in the storm's gray light, eyes steady, as if the hurricane was just another inconvenience. Dr. Lena Moore. Ethan hadn't expected to see her here, not tonight, not when he'd come to disappear. Lena lifted her voice just enough. "Ethan, I saw your truck lights for a second. Then they went dark." Ethan didn't answer immediately. Silence was information too. The dog's growl softened but didn't stop. Lucas stirred on the couch with a weak sound. Ethan made a decision. He opened the door, chain still on, just enough to speak. Lena's eyes flicked past him, sharp. She saw the blankets, the blood smear on the floor, the dog on the rug. Her expression changed. No gasp, no drama. Just a tightening of focus, like her mind clicked into problem-solving. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan kept his voice low. "Found them near the pumping station. Bound. Hypothermic." Lena's gaze moved to the German shepherd. "And him?" Ethan nodded once. "Same." The dog watched Lena. Lena crouched slowly, careful the way you approached a wounded animal that still had teeth and pride. "Hey," she said softly, and there was something in her voice that wasn't fear. "You're safe in here." The shepherd's ears twitched. Ethan unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. Lena stepped in, bringing rain and cold with her. She shrugged off her coat and immediately went to the dog, hands hovering until she read his body language. She looked over her shoulder at Ethan. "I have a field kit in my truck, proper vet supplies, antibiotics, needles. I was checking traps near the canal before the storm got worse." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You drove in this?" Lena gave him a small, humorless look. "I've driven through worse than rain." Ethan believed her. Lena didn't say things she didn't mean. Outside, thunder rolled low and long, like something clearing its throat. Lena didn't wait for permission. She moved with purpose, already assessing the dog's flank, the rope burns, the tremor in the legs. "Lucas," Ethan said, leaning over the couch. "Lucas, stay with me." Lucas's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they found Ethan. He tried to sit up and hissed, pain cutting through the fog. Ethan held him down with a steady palm. "Don't, not yet." Lucas's mouth worked. Dog! The German shepherd turned its head toward Lucas like it had been waiting for that. Lucas's eyes filled. Not tears, not yet. Just a raw relief that made his throat bob. Ethan glanced at Lena. "Get your kit." Lena nodded once, already moving back to the door. Ethan caught her arm. Not hard, just enough to anchor. "You go out there alone," he said quietly. "You're a target." Lena's eyes met his. "So are you." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't have time to waste on a conversation where both people were right. Lena pulled her hood up and stepped into the storm. Ethan locked the door behind her. Then he turned back to the room, Lucas shivering, the dog trembling, the note on the table like a timer. And he understood with absolute clarity the hurricane wasn't the danger. It was the curtain. And something out there was waiting for morning. Ethan fed the heater with another canister and adjusted the blankets again, making a cocoon around Lucas that left his face visible and his chest able to rise cleanly. He rubbed Lucas's hands in short, brisk strokes, not frantic, not gentle. Enough friction to remind blood it was supposed to move. "Tell me what you remember," Ethan said. Lucas swallowed. His lips were cracked. I was on patrol. Canal route. Captain—" He stopped as if the word itself hurt. "Captain told me to take the gate road, said it was a welfare check." Ethan's eyes didn't blink. Which gate? Lucas's gaze drifted toward the ceiling as if the answer was written there. Lockhouse Road, by the pumping station. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Lucas continued, voice scraping. "I saw a truck, no lights, backed up to the station like it owned it. I called it in. Radio died. Then men, masks, they came out of the reeds." The shepherd let out a low sound, almost a whine. Lucas's eyes shifted to the dog. He fought, bought me time. Lucas's voice broke on the last word, then hardened again with effort. "They didn't want me dead right away. They wanted fear, wanted me to know I'd been picked." Ethan leaned in. "Did you see faces?" Lucas shook his head weakly. "No, but one had a ring. Big, gold, like a stamp." He breathed in sharply. "And they said Dawn." Ethan's gaze went to the note on the table. "Dawn finishes it. Not a threat. A schedule." The dog shifted, muscles twitching with pain. Ethan crouched beside him again. He pressed 2 fingers against the shepherd's ribcage, feeling the rapid flutter of a heart working too hard. "You kept barking," Ethan murmured, and there was something like respect in the words. "You kept him alive." The dog's eyes stayed on Ethan, unblinking, not grateful, committed. The door banged once in the wind, then the lock clicked. Lena returning, moving fast, carrying a hard case that looked designed to survive abuse. The hurricane didn't ease. It settled in. Wind pressed against the stilt house like it was trying to pick it up and shake secrets out of the floorboards. Rain found every weak seam and turned it into a leak. The bayou below churned, dark water slapping the posts, carrying branches and debris like messages nobody wanted. Inside, heat fought a slow war against cold. Officer Ethan Cole sat at the table with the hard case open, Lena's sterile pack spread out like a small private battlefield. He kept his movements efficient. Bandage, check pulse, rewrap, adjust blankets, repeat. The work was quiet enough that it felt like a ritual. Deputy Lucas Reed drifted in and out of consciousness, his body deciding what it could spare. When his eyes opened, they flicked to the floor first, always to the dog. Shadow lay on a rug near the heater vent, his body bandaged along the flank, his legs tucked in close like he was saving heat. His ears rotated constantly, as if he could hear through the wind. Lena's thermometer beeped softly. She read it, then exhaled through her nose. "Fever's climbing." Ethan's gaze didn't move from Lucas's face. "Infection." "Or stress," Lena said. "Or both. He's been through shock, and—" Her eyes tightened slightly. "That wound wasn't cleaned right away." Ethan's jaw flexed. "We're not losing him." Lena didn't argue. "We need antibiotics I don't carry in my field kit." "Then we improvise until morning," Ethan said. Lena's head tipped. "Morning is what they promised." Ethan's eyes went to the note again, sitting on the table under a paperweight. The ink had bled, but the message still looked like a line drawn in black across the room. "Dawn finishes it." Ethan folded the paper once, then again, small and controlled, as if shrinking it could shrink what it meant. He tucked it into an evidence bag from Lena's kit. He didn't need it in his sight. He needed it documented. Lucas stirred, a hoarse sound escaping him. "Captain!" Ethan looked at him. "Tell me." Lucas swallowed. His throat worked like sandpaper. "Captain Maria Hayes," he said, and the name came out careful, like he was afraid the walls would hear. She told me to take Lockhouse Road, said it was nothing, routine." Lena's eyes flicked to Ethan. Ethan kept his voice even. "You sure it was her?" Lucas nodded weakly. Her voice, her code phrase on the radio. She said, "Keep it quiet. Don't spook the locals." Lena's mouth tightened. That's not how she talks. Ethan didn't say what he was thinking, but he felt it, the way your brain formed a shape before you had evidence to name it. If Lucas was right, then the people hunting them weren't just criminals. They had someone with authority, someone who could point a rookie at the wrong road and call it routine. A gust hit the house and made the windows rattle. Shadow's head lifted sharply. A low growl rolled out of his chest. Ethan's hand went to his pistol without thought. Lena froze, eyes on the dog. "What is it, Shadow?" Shadow's gaze locked on the northern wall, the side facing the canal path. The growl deepened. Ethan moved to the side window, careful, not silhouetting himself. He peeled the curtain back a fraction. Darkness, rain, a field of moving reeds, nothing he could see. But Shadow didn't care what Ethan's eyes could see. Shadow's entire body was rigid with certainty. Ethan shut the curtain and turned back. "No lights," he murmured. Lena's voice stayed low. "Could be debris." Ethan shook his head once. "That's not a debris reaction." Lucas made a weak sound. "They came from the reeds." Ethan's mind clicked again. The pumping station wasn't random. Lockhouse Road wasn't random. The reeds weren't random. Those routes were used by people who knew how to move without being seen. Ethan walked to the kitchen counter and pulled open a drawer until he found what he needed. Twine, a roll of duct tape, a handful of empty cans he'd saved because the Bayou didn't have reliable trash pickup. Lena watched him. "You're making noise." "I'm making alarms," Ethan said. Lena's brow furrowed. "In a hurricane." Ethan's mouth barely moved. Even in a hurricane, a human footstep is a different rhythm. He moved through the stilt house, stringing twine between posts and nails, attaching cans in small clusters. He didn't make booby traps, not inside, not where a single misstep could kill the wrong person. He made warnings. He made time. The wind could scream all it wanted. A can rattling in the wrong place at the wrong time still told a story. Lena followed him, quiet. "You do this often?" Ethan didn't answer directly. "I do what works." She watched him for a moment, then said, "I'm going to check your generator." Ethan's head turned. "Now?" Lena held his gaze. "If they cut your power, you lose heat. You lose heat, you lose Lucas and Shadow." Ethan nodded once. "Go, but take the flashlight, and stay in sight of the porch." Lena grabbed the light, pulled her hood up, and stepped onto the porch. Shadow's ears tracked her movement, but his growl eased. He trusted her enough to let her move. Lucas's breathing hitched. I didn't mean—" Ethan leaned closer. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were sent." Lucas's eyes filled now. Finally, "I trusted her." Ethan's voice stayed steady. "So did a lot of people." And that, Ethan thought, was exactly why corruption worked. Because it didn't wear a mask. It wore credibility. Lena returned a few minutes later, rain dripping from her sleeves. "Generator's fine. Fuel's low." Ethan looked at the clock he'd set on the table. It was hard to measure time in a hurricane. The sky didn't change much. But dawn would. Ethan moved to the stilt house's small storage closet and pulled out what he'd packed when he came here to disappear. Things that made sense if you planned to be alone. A hardened laptop, a small sat communicator, a compact battery pack. Lena noticed. "You came prepared." Ethan's eyes were flat. "I came quiet. Prepared is a side effect." He powered the laptop on. No internet, no cell, but it wasn't useless. It held tools. He looked at Lena. "What's the nearest place with a stable line?" Lena hesitated. "County office is inland, but—" "Not for calls," Ethan said. "For records, permits, ownership." Lena's eyes sharpened. "You think this is tied to infrastructure?" Ethan's gaze moved to the note bagged on the table. People don't stage an execution in a pumping station unless they own the route. Lucas whispered, "There was a warehouse." Ethan turned. "Tell me." Lucas swallowed again. "Seafood place. Looks legit, but trucks go there at odd hours, no lights. And the smell—" he grimaced. "Not fish." Lena's eyes narrowed. Chemicals. Ethan nodded, mind already building a map. Then Shadow made a sound, not a growl this time, but a short, urgent bark. He struggled to his feet. His legs trembled, but he stood. Ethan watched him. Easy? Shadow ignored him. He limped toward the back door, nose low. He sniffed the crack under the frame, then turned his head slightly, as if tracking a line only he could see. Then he looked back at Ethan, not pleading, commanding. Ethan's blood cooled. He smells something. Lena moved closer. Storm wind carries scents weird. He could be picking up anything. Shadow barked once, sharp. Then he pressed his nose to the floorboards near the corner where Ethan had stacked his spare firewood. Ethan crouched, ran his hand along the boards, and felt it, cold air threading up through a gap, a space beneath. Ethan's gaze lifted to Lena. There's a crawlspace access. Lena's face tightened. You think someone... Ethan didn't finish. He grabbed a pry bar from the tool rack and wedged it under the board. The wood lifted with resistance. A cold breath of air rose from the dark beneath the house, and with it that same metallic scent. Ethan angled the flashlight down. Nothing moved, but he saw disturbed mud, fresh, not old, not from animals. Shadow's growl returned, low and steady. Ethan replaced the board carefully. Then he stood. His voice came out quiet, hard. They've been here. Lucas's eyes went wide, fear snapping him more awake than warmth ever could. No! Lena's hand moved to her mouth, then away, forcing herself not to panic. How close? Ethan looked at the back wall, at the darkness outside it, at the reeds, swaying like they were whispering. Close enough to smell us, he said, and close enough, Lena added softly, to be waiting. The hurricane broke just after midnight, not gently. It cracked open. Wind backed off in sudden, exhausted gusts. The rain thinned from needles to sheets, then to a steady drizzle that felt almost polite compared to what had come before. And then silence. Not true silence. The bayou never gave you that. But the violent roar eased enough that Ethan's alarms became meaningful again. He didn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the front window with his pistol in his lap, the sat communicator on the table within reach, the laptop open with its dim screen casting a weak glow. Lena dozed in short increments, waking every time Shadow shifted or Lucas coughed. She was the kind of person who didn't allow unconsciousness to win for long. Lucas drifted too, but his sleep wasn't rest. It was survival. Just before dawn, Shadow lifted his head again, his ears pinned forward. A low, deep growl began. Ethan's body moved before thought. He raised a hand, silent. Lena's eyes snapped open. She looked at Shadow, then at Ethan. Her breathing stayed controlled, but her face had gone pale. Ethan moved to the side window and peered out. Gray light, reeds, floodwater receding slowly. And then he saw it. A faint line in the mud running parallel to the house. A track. Too straight, too deliberate. Human. Ethan's gaze followed it. It led toward the old canal path, toward Lockhouse Road. Ethan backed away from the window, jaw tight. We're not waiting inside. Lena blinked. You want to go out? Ethan shook his head once. I want to see what they left before they come back and clean it. Lucas tried to sit up, grimacing. I can... Ethan cut him off gently. No, you can guide us from here. Lena stood, pulling on her boots. Then I'm coming. Ethan looked at her. Lena's gaze didn't flinch. You need a second set of eyes, and Shadow's fever won't wait. Shadow pushed himself up, limping but determined. Ethan crouched beside him. You stay. Shadow's eyes stayed locked on Ethan. Then he took one limping step toward the door anyway. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Fine, but you stay close. They moved out into the gray dawn, water pooling around their boots, the air sharp with wet earth and decaying leaves. The pumping station wasn't far. The storm had torn debris loose, branches across the path, a section of fence down, a small boat half lodged in reeds like it had tried to escape. Ethan swept the area with his flashlight, even though daylight was rising. Light wasn't for seeing. It was for focusing. Shadow's nose went low to the mud immediately. He ignored everything that didn't matter. He followed something specific. Lena stayed near Ethan, scanning. They reached the pumping station and found the spot where Ethan had cut Lucas and Shadow free. The mud was churned now, partly erased by stormwater, but not erased completely. Shadow barked once, then pawed at the ground. Ethan crouched and used a stick to push aside wet leaves. A shell casing rolled into view. Ethan didn't touch it barehanded. He used tweezers from Lena's kit and dropped it into a plastic bag. Lena leaned closer. Marking. Ethan rotated it under the light. Not factory. Scratched. Lena's eyes narrowed. A signal to identify the batch. Shadow was already moving again. He led them toward a half-submerged piling where the note had been taped. Beneath it, stuck to the wood, was a strip of marine-grade zip tie, cut clean, not snapped. Ethan bagged it. Then Shadow stopped near a patch of reeds and began pawing again, urgent. Lena's breath caught. What is it? Ethan knelt, pushed aside mud and plant matter. A rag, black cloth, stiff with chemical residue. When Ethan lifted it, the smell hit hard, bitter, acrid. Lena's face tightened. That's not fuel. Ethan's eyes stayed cold. That's processing. He bagged it. 3 items. Small. But together they told a pattern. Disciplined restraint, disciplined shooting, chemical handling. Ethan stood and looked toward the canal. Lockhouse, he said. Lena nodded slowly. If they're using that route. Ethan's mind was already mapping. Then the legit front is near a place that ships on paper. Lena's voice was tight. A warehouse. Shadow's head lifted sharply, nose twitching. He wasn't done. He moved in a straight line toward the path leading back, not to the stilt house, to the canal road. Ethan followed. After a short distance, they reached a rise where floodwater had receded enough to reveal tire tracks. Heavy, wide, not a pickup. Trucks. Lena crouched, fingers hovering over the tread marks without touching. Fresh. Ethan's gaze sharpened. That means the storm didn't stop them. Lena looked up. It covered them. Ethan's eyes flicked back to Shadow, who was staring down the road like he could see through distance. Ethan felt the turn happen inside him, the moment the situation stopped being survive and became understand. He had micro-clues. He had a route. He needed a name. And he needed to know who inside the system had pointed Lucas at death. They returned to the stilt house with evidence bagged and minds sharpening. Inside, Lucas looked up, fear in his eyes. Did you find anything? Ethan set the bags on the table like chess pieces. Enough. Lena pulled out a topographical map she kept folded in her coat. Bayou routes, lockhouses, service roads. She spread it out. Her finger traced a line. This is Lockhouse Road. This, she tapped a spot, is where trucks can slip through to the main highway without hitting town. Ethan's finger moved to a marked facility. Seafood distribution. Lena nodded. Warehouse on paper. Ethan looked at Lucas. You said Captain Hayes sent you. Lucas's face tightened. Yes. Lena's eyes narrowed. We verify. Ethan nodded. We don't accuse. We confirm. He turned to Lena. You can get records. Lena blinked. County office. Ethan nodded. Permits. Ownership. Who signs fast tracks? Lena's gaze went distant for a second. I know a clerk. He likes talking. Ethan didn't smile. Then let him. He looked at Lucas. You and Shadow stay here. Lucas's face flashed with panic. Alone? Ethan crouched. Not alone. Shadow's with you, and I'm setting the perimeter. Shadow's ears flicked, as if he recognized the assignment. Ethan stood and checked his pistol, then moved outside to reinforce alarms. As he passed the woodpile, Shadow's head snapped toward it again. His growl returned. Ethan paused. He followed Shadow's gaze. The woodpile. Shadow limped to it and began pawing at the base, digging in mud that had dried enough to resist. Ethan knelt beside him. What is it? Shadow dug harder, ignoring pain. Ethan's fingers hit something that wasn't wood, fabric. Ethan pulled it free, a black nylon bag stiff with mud. His pulse didn't spike, his brain just went colder. He carried it inside, set it on the table. Lena stared. That wasn't here before. Ethan shook his head once. No. He put on gloves. He unzipped the bag slowly. Inside, a plastic case. Inside the case, SIM cards, burner phone's lifeblood, and a mud-smeared flash drive. Lena's voice went soft. That's a go bag. Ethan looked at Lucas. Do you recognize it? Lucas shook his head, eyes wide. Ethan exhaled once, slow. They thought everyone was dead. They cached it nearby. Lena swallowed, or someone planted it to retrieve later. Ethan didn't answer. He moved to the laptop, powered it on, and plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered. Files appeared. Spreadsheets, contact lists, reroute schedules. Then dispatch logs. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He clicked, Patrol reroutes, authorization overrides, timestamps. Lena leaned closer, reading. These are official. Lucas's breathing quickened. Captain! Ethan's hand lifted, stopping him. He clicked the signature field. A digital authorization string. A name. Captee M. Hayes. The room went silent. Lucas made a small, broken sound. No? Lena's face went pale, but her eyes stayed sharp. That's a supervisor override. Ethan stared at the screen, not blinking. The betrayal wasn't a theory anymore. It was an electronic trail. And it meant one thing with ruthless clarity. Captain Maria Hayes wasn't just a name in a file. She was the door being held open. Shadow let out a low, steady growl, as if the dog understood something human, that the danger now wore a badge. The first warning came from Shadow, a sound so low Ethan felt it in his bones before he heard it. Shadow rose, limping forgotten, body coiled. He moved toward the back door, nose down. He sniffed once, then froze, his ears pinned forward, his tail stiffened. A deep growl rolled out like thunder under the floor. Ethan looked up from the laptop instantly. Lena's hand went to the table edge, steadying herself. Lucas's eyes widened. They're here. Ethan stood in one smooth motion, pistol in hand. He didn't rush to the door. He trusted Shadow more than his own panic. Shadow whined, urgent, and nudged Ethan's leg, pushing him away from the back door and toward the side window. Then Shadow looked toward the woodpile corner again. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He crept to the window, peeled back the curtain a fraction, and scanned the mud line near the woodpile. At first, nothing. Then, faint. A line. A thin, almost invisible cord stretched between two posts. Ethan's breath went colder. He followed it with his eyes. A small, dark block half buried in mud. A pressure plate. Improvised. Deadly enough, Lena's voice was barely audible. They wanted you to run. Ethan nodded once. Flush us out. Shadow had just saved them again. Ethan turned fast, voice sharp but controlled. Away from the back wall, now. Lena moved first, pulling Lucas's blankets tighter as she shifted him away from windows. Ethan grabbed duct tape, scissors, and the empty cans. He didn't have explosives expertise, but he had something just as valuable, an operator's hatred of predictable movement. He slipped out the front door, quiet as a shadow, hugging the porch rail. Wind tugged at his hood, rain still falling in light sheets. In the gray dawn, figures moved near the reeds. 6. Disciplined formation, rifles held low, heads scanning. Not local idiots, professionals. Ethan's mind went calm in the way it always did when the moment arrived. He set his first alarm, twine stretched low, cans hanging loose, then another. He dug shallow pits in the mud with his hands, covered them with thin reeds, just enough to break a stride, not to kill, to slow, to make noise, to create confusion. A twig snapped. Ethan froze mid-motion. A figure had shifted closer than he expected. Ethan slid back under the porch, then inside, locking the door behind him. Shadow stood in the center of the room, body rigid, eyes burning. Lena had Lucas positioned behind the kitchen island, out of direct sight lines. Ethan raised a hand. Signal. Then the first attacker hit Ethan's trip line outside. Cans clattered, loud and ugly. A curse followed. Ethan didn't fire blindly. He waited. A shadow moved near the back corner, just where the pressure plate trap waited. The attackers expected victims to bolt. Ethan let them. He fired once, controlled, into a porch post just above the attacker's head. Wood splintered. The attacker dove down, disoriented. Lena's breath hitched. Lucas clutched a kitchen drawer handle, trying to stay quiet. Shadow growled, teeth bared. Gunfire answered Ethan's shot, rounds thudding into the stilt house's walls, sending splinters into the air. Ethan moved low, staying out of the window lines. He shouted just enough to control the room. "Stay down!" Shadow barked once, then moved toward the back wall, ears rotating. He wasn't panicking. He was tracking. Ethan saw two figures moving wide, trying to flank toward the west side. He grabbed the last two smoke canisters he'd kept for emergencies, not military grenades, but compact smoke devices from his survival kit. He ripped them open and tossed them out a side window. Smoke billowed thick, swallowing sight lines. Outside, attackers shouted, confused. Ethan slipped out the front door again, using porch shadows and smoke cover. He moved like he belonged to the swamp. One attacker stumbled into a pit Ethan had dug, dropping to a knee with a grunt. Ethan was on him in a blink, rifle butt coming down hard on the shoulder. Not lethal, disabling. The attacker's weapon fell. Ethan flipped him, knee in his back, zip-tied his wrists with brutal efficiency. Shadow's bark erupted from inside, sharp, urgent, alerting Ethan to movement. Ethan dragged the captive toward the house, keeping low. Rounds snapped through reeds nearby, close enough to cut the air. Ethan shoved the captive inside and slammed the door shut behind them. Lena dropped the wooden bar into place with shaking hands that still worked. The captive, a wiry man, mid-20s, stared around the room like he'd walked into the wrong nightmare. Shadow stood over him, growl vibrating. Lucas looked at the captive with rage and fear, mixed. Ethan stood in front of the captive, calm as stone. Outside, gunfire slowed. The attackers realized the equation had changed. They were no longer hunting wounded prey. They were facing a coordinated defense. After a few more scattered shots, the remaining figures melted back into the reeds. Silence returned. Thick, heavy. It smelled like smoke and wet wood and gunpowder. Lena exhaled, hands trembling now that the moment allowed it. "They'll come again." Ethan's eyes stayed on the captive. "Not before they regroup." Lucas's voice was hoarse. "Who are you?" The captive spat on the floor, bravado thin. "Nobody." Ethan didn't hit him. He didn't need to. He let silence do the work. Minutes passed. The captive's breathing slowed, then quickened again. Silence in a room like this wasn't empty. It was pressure. Ethan spoke finally. "We know Captain Hayes." The captive flinched, just a flicker. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "That name scares you more than prison." The captive swallowed. Lena leaned close to Ethan, whispering, "If Hayes is tied to them, she'll burn him first." Ethan nodded slightly. He turned back to the captive. "She'll offer you up. Say you acted alone. You'll be the sacrificial animal." The captive's jaw worked. Lucas's eyes were hard now. "You left me to drown." The captive's gaze darted to Shadow, whose growl deepened. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "Tell us the top." The captive hesitated. Ethan waited. Finally, the captive slumped. "They call him Kane." Lena's breath caught. Lucas whispered, "Kane." Ethan's eyes stayed cold. "Next move." The captive licked his lips. "Big transfer. 2 nights. Canal pass. Lockhouse route." Ethan's mind was already forming the counterplan. Lena said softly, "We need Federal." Ethan nodded once. Lucas whispered, "My phone." Ethan cut him off. "No phones." He pulled the SAT communicator closer. He looked at Lena. "Do you have someone you trust?" Lena hesitated, then shook her head. "Not like that." Lucas swallowed. I know a DEA contact. Captain Hayes, she bragged about working with them on task forces." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Names." Lucas swallowed again. "Agent? I don't know." And then Lucas's eyes widened as if a memory snapped into place. "Corbin," he whispered. "Agent Corbin. I saw his name in a briefing packet once." Ethan didn't argue. He dialed the SAT communicator's secure line feature and began calling numbers from Lucas's memory fragments and from what he could pull from the go-bag contact list. It took 3 tries. Then a voice answered, sharp, alert. "Who is this?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "This is Officer Ethan Cole. I have Deputy Lucas Reed in my custody. He's alive, and I have evidence tying Captain Maria Hayes to a trafficking corridor." Silence, then controlled fury. "Where?" Ethan gave coordinates, and just like that, the circle expanded. Not because the world got safer, but because the right kind of allies made it harder for darkness to move unnoticed. Agent teams arrived at dusk, minor silhouettes in rain gear, moving quiet, keeping lights low. Ethan didn't relax when he saw them. He checked their posture, their discipline, the way they approached the stilt house. Trust wasn't automatic. It was earned. Agent Corbin was lean, sharp-eyed, and tired in the way people got tired when their life was built on dismantling other people's evil. He moved into Ethan's space like someone who didn't waste time. He looked at Lucas first. Then he looked at the dog. Shadow lifted his head, eyes steady. Corbin nodded once, respectful. Ethan handed over the evidence bag and the flash drive. Corbin's jaw tightened as he read the authorization strings. "Captain Hayes," he murmured. "Jesus," Ethan's voice stayed flat. "We can lure her." Corbin's eyes narrowed. How? Ethan laid the map out. Canal pass, one way in, one way out. We force their timing. We force her presence. Corbin stared at Ethan for a long beat. Then he nodded. We do it clean, no collateral. Ethan's eyes flicked to Lucas. They use people as shields. Corbin's mouth hardened. Then we don't give them the chance. The next night, the canal pass became a mouth with teeth. Reeds high on both sides, water black, mudbanks slick. Ethan lay prone on a rise, rifle braced, eyes scanning through low-light optics. Below, Lucas, still weak but standing, was positioned with Lena behind cover near the pass entrance, their comms tight, their breathing controlled. Shadow was not inside a house anymore. Shadow sat beside Lucas, ears pricked, body coiled, fever lowered enough for movement. He wasn't fully healed, but he was loyal enough to ignore pain. Engines rumbled in the distance. 2 trucks rolled in, lights off. Men moved around them, disciplined. Then a figure stepped out wearing a jacket that looked like authority until you knew it was betrayal. Captain Maria Hayes. Ethan's blood didn't spike. It went quiet. This was the moment. Corbin's voice whispered in comms, "Hold, hold!" Hayes turned, speaking to someone Ethan couldn't see yet. Then Kane appeared, tall, gaunt, eyes dead. And then, worse, someone pulled a small child out of the truck. A shield. Ethan felt Lucas's breath hitch over comms. Lena whispered, "No." Hayes grabbed the child, yanking them in front, pistol pressed to the side of the small head. "Back off," Hayes screamed. "I'll do it." Federal lights snapped on from both ends of the pass. A loudspeaker boomed. "Drop your weapons." Chaos erupted. Shots cracked, reeds shredded. Ethan tracked Hayes through optics, waiting for a clean angle that didn't exist. Shadow's body tensed. Lucas's voice broke. "We can't." Ethan's voice stayed steady. "We can." And then Shadow moved, not on command, on instinct. He launched, a black and tan streak cutting through mud and reeds. Hayes saw him too late. Shadow slammed into Hayes's legs and body, not biting, not tearing, just driving with full weight and purpose, knocking Hayes off balance. The child stumbled free, scrambling toward cover. Hayes raised her pistol toward Shadow. Ethan's finger tightened. One shot, precise. The pistol flew from Hayes's hand into the mud. Lucas surged forward, tackling Hayes down, handcuffs snapping closed. Kane tried to run. Corbin's team closed. The trap held. Minutes later, the pass was quiet again, lit by federal floodlights and the heaving breaths of men who had almost become monsters. Shadow stood, panting, mud on his coat, eyes locked on Lucas and Lena. Lucas knelt, forehead touching Shadow's for one brief second. "Good boy," he whispered, voice breaking. Ethan watched them and felt something shift, small, internal, like a locked door cracking open. Weeks later, Lucas stood in a courthouse with a healed wrist and a steady gaze. Captain Hayes stood in chains, her badge gone, her eyes hollow. Kane's network collapsed under evidence. Lena returned to her work with a new edge, knowing her quiet life had teeth now. Ethan went back to the stilt house once more, not because he wanted to disappear again, because he wanted to remember what it felt like to protect a place until it could be quiet. Shadow sat on the porch with him, watching the bayou breathe. Peace, Ethan realized, wasn't found. It was built. And sometimes it was built with mud under your boots, rain in your face, and a loyal dog who refused to let Dawn finish anything.